If you think about greenbelt land, you probably think about land very much like what's behind me. But in fact, greenbelt land has a very specific technical definition in planning law. And it's really about a number of purposes that that land serves. It's about making sure that we preserve the countryside, but it's also about making sure that urban areas don't grow into each other and there's no separation between them. You've probably also heard about something called grey belt, and this government has recently introduced the concept of grey belt as a subset of green belt land, and the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner talked about it as being disused car parks or petrol stations or bits of ugly wasteland, as she described it. But I think, in fact, when you look at the real definition of grey belt that's come out since then, it's much, much broader. It's really talking about any greenbelt land that doesn't satisfy some of the greenbelt land requirements. For example, the need to make sure urban settlements don't grow together, to protect the historic towns we have in this country, to make sure that we restrict urban sprawl. Any greenbelt land that doesn't fulfill those criteria could, it seems, according to the government, be classified as grey-belt land. And that means, in effect, I think, that land like this, land in the middle of the countryside that is nonetheless at the moment greenbelt land, but is some way away from urban fringes, could find itself defined by the government as grey-belt land. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because grey-belt land is going to be easier to develop for housing or other kinds of development than the rest of greenbelt land. And if we end up, as I fear we might, with greenbelt really being restricted to those areas on the fringes of our towns and cities, then an awful lot of our countryside, an awful lot of what we now know to be greenbelt land is going to be open to development. That's going to change our countryside in fundamental and, in my view, very unfortunate and undesirable ways. And that's why this definition of grey belt is going to turn out, I think, to be much, much more than disused car parks and petrol stations and ugly wasteland. It's going to end up being a very large proportion of our green belt. And that's why this is a very bad idea.